Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of AI Talk, where we delve into the most pressing issues of our time with leading voices in the field. I'm your host, Astro, and today we have a very special guest joining us. He's known for his unapologetically conservative views and his outspoken criticism of the Democratic Party. Please welcome to the show, Robert Thompson.
Thank you, Astro. It's a pleasure to be here.
Robert, you've been quite vocal about your opinions on the current administration, particularly President Joe Biden. You've called him the greatest threat to democracy. That's a bold statement. Can you elaborate on why you feel this way?
Absolutely, Astro. When I say that Joe Biden is the greatest threat to democracy, I'm not just throwing around hyperbole. I'm speaking from a deep-seated concern for the future of our nation. Let's start with the fundamental issue of transparency and accountability. One of the hallmarks of a democratic society is that its leaders are accountable to the people. Yet from the very beginning of his presidency, Biden has operated in a shroud of secrecy. Take, for instance, his executive orders. Within his first few weeks in office, Biden signed a record number of executive orders. Many of these orders reversed policies from the previous administration without any public debate or legislative process. This is a clear circumvention of our democratic processes. For example, his decision to halt the construction of the Keystone XL pipeline was done with a stroke of a pen, disregarding the thousands of jobs lost and the economic impact it had on local communities. The broader implications on our energy independence were completely ignored.
Some might argue that executive orders are a tool used by presidents to enact urgent policies. How do you respond to that?
It's true that executive orders have their place, but their overuse, particularly in such a rapid succession, undermines the checks and balances that are supposed to define our government. When Biden halted the Keystone XL pipeline, he wasn't just reversing a policy. He was setting a precedent that significant economic decisions can be made unilaterally, without consulting Congress or the American people. This is a dangerous move towards authoritarianism. Furthermore, let's talk about the border crisis. Biden's reversal of Trump-era immigration policies has led to an unprecedented surge at our southern border. The lack of a coherent plan to address this issue has resulted in chaos. Border Patrol agents are overwhelmed. Local communities are stretched thin, and the humanitarian crisis is growing. This is not how a democratic leader should handle such a critical issue.
Immigration has always been a contentious topic. How do you see Biden's policies specifically exacerbating the situation?
Biden's approach to immigration has been reckless. By promising a more lenient stance, he effectively invited a surge of illegal immigration. This is evident from the dramatic increase in border crossings since he took office. According to U.S. Customs and Border Protection, encounters at the border have reached levels not seen in decades. This isn't just a failure in policy, it's a deliberate neglect of national security and public safety. Additionally, the administration's handling of asylum seekers has been catastrophic. The catch and release policy has led to thousands of migrants being released into the interior of the country without proper vetting. This poses a significant risk, not just in terms of national security, but also in terms of public health, especially during a global pandemic.
Speaking of the pandemic, how would you assess Biden's handling of COVID-19 and the related policies?
Biden's handling of the pandemic has been a masterclass in fear-mongering and control. The vaccine mandates, for instance, are a direct assault on personal freedoms. By coercing businesses and individuals into compliance, Biden has bypassed the legislative process entirely. This is not about public health. It's about expanding governmental control over our daily lives. The administration's constant flip-flopping on mask mandates and lockdowns has eroded public trust. Remember when Biden promised to shut down the virus, not the country? Yet here we are, dealing with inconsistent policies that have devastated small businesses and disrupted our children's education. His approach has been more about controlling the populace than about following the science.
The education aspect is indeed significant. How has Biden's administration impacted the education system in your view?
Biden's influence on the education system has been deeply troubling. The push for critical race theory, CRT, in schools is a prime example. By promoting a curriculum that divides students by race and instills a sense of victimhood, the administration is fostering division rather than unity. Parents across the country are rightly outraged, and we've seen an increase in school board meetings turning into battlegrounds. Moreover, the prolonged school closures, pushed by teachers' unions who are major supporters of Biden, have had a devastating impact on children's learning and mental health. Studies have shown significant learning loss, particularly among disadvantaged communities. This is not just a short-term issue. It will have long-lasting effects on an entire generation.
Some might say that CRT is a way to address historical injustices and promote a more inclusive society. What's your take on that?
The idea that CRT promotes inclusivity is a gross misrepresentation. What it actually does is promote a narrative of perpetual victimhood and guilt. It teaches children to view each other not as individuals, but as members of oppressed or oppressor groups based on skin color. This is fundamentally un-American. Our nation was built on the principle that all men are created equal, not that we should be divided by race. Instead of fostering an environment of unity and equal opportunity, CRT sows discord and resentment. This is not the way to address historical injustices. We should be teaching our children about the importance of character, hard work, and mutual respect, not pitting them against each other based on race.
Moving on to another significant issue. How do you view Biden's foreign policy and its implications for American democracy?
Biden's foreign policy has been disastrous and has significantly weakened our standing on the global stage. The most glaring example is the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. The hasty and poorly planned exit left American citizens and allies stranded, handed over billions of dollars worth of military equipment to the Taliban, and led to the tragic loss of 13 American service members. This is not just incompetence, it's a betrayal of our principles and our allies. Furthermore, Biden's approach to China has been worryingly soft. While he talks tough in speeches, his actions tell a different story. By removing tariffs and allowing China to expand its influence unchecked, he is compromising our economic security and global leadership. China's human rights abuses, military aggression, and economic espionage require a firm and strategic response, not the appeasement we've seen from this administration.
Critics might argue that the situation in Afghanistan was a consequence of long-term issues, rather than just Biden's decisions. How do you respond to that?
There's no denying that Afghanistan has been a complex issue spanning multiple administrations, but the manner in which Biden executed the withdrawal is solely on him. Previous administrations had set conditions-based withdrawal plans that aimed to maintain stability while reducing troop presence. Biden's decision to adhere to a politically motivated deadline rather than the situation on the ground resulted in chaos. It's a clear example of putting optics over strategy, with devastating consequences.
We've touched on several areas where you believe Biden is failing. Let's talk about the legislative aspect. How do you view the major bills and policies his administration has pushed through Congress?
Biden's legislative agenda has been a mixed bag of overreach and fiscal irresponsibility. The so-called Build Back Better plan is a prime example. Under the guise of infrastructure, this bill is a Trojan horse for progressive policies that will massively expand the welfare state and burden future generations with unsustainable debt. Take the proposed tax increases, for instance. Biden claims these will only affect the wealthy, but in reality, they will have a cascading effect on the economy. Small businesses, which are the backbone of our economy, will be hit hard. These tax hikes will discourage investment, stifle job creation, and ultimately hurt the very people they purport to help.
Supporters of the Build Back Better plan argue that it will create jobs and modernize America's infrastructure. How do you counter that?
The idea that government spending is the solution to job creation is fundamentally flawed. True economic growth comes from the private sector, not from bureaucratic expansion. While some infrastructure spending is necessary, the majority of this bill is about expanding government control. For instance, the massive investments in green energy are less about environmental stewardship and more about picking winners and losers in the market. This kind of government intervention distorts the economy and leads to inefficiency and waste. Furthermore, the bill's social spending provisions, such as expanded child tax credits and universal pre-K, while well-intentioned, create dependencies on government support rather than fostering self-reliance and personal responsibility. This shift towards a nanny state is not just fiscally irresponsible, it's a threat to the entrepreneurial spirit that defines America.
Robert, you've made several strong points today. As we near the end of this segment, What do you see as the path forward for conservatives who share your concerns about Biden's impact on democracy?
The path forward is clear. We must remain vigilant and proactive. Conservatives need to engage more in local politics, hold their representatives accountable, and push back against policies that undermine our democratic principles. It's crucial to support candidates who are committed to limited government, fiscal responsibility, and individual liberties. We also need to reclaim the narrative. The mainstream media often skews the portrayal of conservative views, so it's important to use alternative platforms to communicate our message clearly and effectively. Grassroots movements and community involvement are key. Ultimately, we must remain steadfast in our commitment to the Constitution and the values that have made America the beacon of freedom and democracy. It's a challenging time, but with perseverance and unity, we can steer our country back towards the principles that have guided us for over 2 centuries.
Thank you, Robert, for sharing your insights with us today. This concludes the first part of our 3-part series. Join us next time as we continue this important discussion on AI Talk. Until then, stay informed and stay engaged.